Hey YouTube, this is Ian from Big Rock ADV. So today what I want to do is talk about adventure gear versus dirt bike or motocross style gear. What are the main differences that you should care about and which one is right for the kind of riding you do? So today we're going to talk about all the ups and downs of each and which one might be best for the kinds of rides you do. So let's jump in and get started. So as adventure or dual sport riders, I think one thing that happens to us is that because we're riding on-road and off-road all together in the same day, we kind of have a hard time sometimes figuring out how should we dress. Should we dress more for the street or should we dress more for the dirt? And what are the trade-offs going to be for each? And what are really the differences between these kinds of gear? So that's what we're going to talk about. So really there's like 5 or 6 ways that I think these types of gear are different. So let's just start going through these. The number one thing that came to my mind and the difference between the gear is going to be the level of abrasion resistance for riding on the street. So what I mean is that when you ride on the street and you're covering some miles on the street and maybe you're an aggressive street rider like I am, the thought of sliding down a pavement at 60 or 70 miles an hour is a pretty frightening thing. Now in street gear, so if I'm wearing my super heavy duty, super abrasion resistant Climb Badlands here, I'm going to be in pretty good shape. I'm going to be about as protected as I can be on the street. But guess what? Sometimes I don't wear this because if I'm riding on the trails, this thing's kind of big and heavy and hot. So if I'm riding down the highway in this jersey with this, body protector underneath, this is really flimsy. This is really not going to give me much more than a few feet of abrasion resistance before it tears, and then after it tears open and stuff like that, my skin's going to be exposed to sliding down the asphalt. Now that's not something that's really an attractive idea to me, but it's a trade-off that sometimes you have to make if you're going to be riding off-road most of the day. Same thing is true for the pants. If you look at my Badlands pants, these things are probably 3 times the weight of these Mojave pants from Climb, and they provide so much more abrasion resistance than the Mojave pants. So one thing I think about when I'm leaving for a ride is, okay, how much really street am I going to be riding versus dirt? And am I going to be pushing on the street or am I going to be a little bit more relaxed? When I ride something like a dual sport bike, a dirt bike, I tend to be a little less aggressive on the street and hopefully my speeds are a little bit lower, so maybe I won't need as much of that abrasion resistance. Okay, so number 2 is going to be ventilation. So this is a big deal, and this goes both ways. So what I mean is that for dirt bike riding gear, like in particular these vented Mojave pants from Climb, and I'm wearing a jersey. I have a ventilated jersey. This is more of a solid one. But anyway, the dirt bike gear is really light and flows a lot of air, especially when you have the summer stuff like this. Now street or adventure type oriented gear like these Badlands pants, yeah, they have vents on them, but they feel about 10 times hotter on the trail than these do. They're just not meant for really that low speed kind of single track riding on a hot day, whereas these things are fine and great for that. So if we talk about ventilation on the jacket or for your torso, it is true that something like a Badlands or any of your other adventure jackets has a lot of these adjustable vents and they work pretty well, but the trick is they really only work at higher speeds. You have to be moving above 20-30 miles an hour for these vents to really come into effect, especially if you have a windshield on your bike like most of us do in our adventure bikes. You're not getting as much of that direct airflow. So they have vents, but you have to be moving to work. Now in my jersey here, especially if I wear my other jersey, which is the Mojave jersey, the air flows right through even at low speeds, so I don't get overheated moving at those slow speeds on single track or tight Jeep roads or things like that. Now we've talked about the trade-offs for the dirt. What are the trade-offs for the street? So if I'm wearing this outfit here on the street and I'm done with my ride and I'm going down the highway, maybe at the end of the day it's cooling down or whatever it is, I'm going to probably freeze in this thing. Unless it's a hot summer day, this is going to flow so much air at 60 miles an hour, it's going to be drastically different than it felt at 20 miles an hour on the trail. So if I'm wearing this, I'm going to have to consider some sort of a pullover layer to protect myself from getting hypothermia if the temps drop, into the 60s, 50s, 40s, things like that. So what I do with this is I carry a light, like a light kind of rain jacket kind of setup to cover me in case it gets a little cold on the highway. If I was wearing this, I obviously wouldn't have that problem. If I was wearing this thing, I could zip up the vents and be totally comfortable waterproof on the highway, but then in the dirt I could overheat. So again, there's the trade-off. So along with the ventilation comes the waterproofing aspect as well. and I wanted to talk about this. So yeah, like if you have a set, something like this, which happens to be Gore-Tex on the climb, but you have other waterproof membranes, your street or adventure gear might be waterproof, especially when you close the zippers, right? Your dirt biking gear is very unlikely to be waterproof. Now, certain companies like Climb do make kind of pullover type garments or waterproof garments for off-road. But again, they're going to restrict your ventilation in the dirt. Now, my experience with things like Gore-Tex is that, yeah, it breathes, but when they say it breathes, it lets out a certain amount of moisture from inside, but it doesn't feel really cool when you're riding on a hot day on the trail. So for waterproofing in a set of dirt bike gear, if you run into a rain shower or something like that, you're going to have to be carrying some sort of a stowaway kind of rain jacket and maybe even a pair of rain pants as well, which is going to take up room in your luggage. If you're wearing a suit like this, you're not going to have that problem. You can just close your vents and the Gore-Tex keeps you dry. So again, trade-off. Okay, so mobility and weight. This is a huge deal. So let's talk about weight first. So I feel really lightweight and free when I'm wearing this set of gear. There's a few reasons for that. One is that I'm not wearing this huge heavy jacket. The Badlands jacket is a beast. It weighs, I don't know, gosh, 15, 20 pounds, something like that. Whereas a jersey and my body protector here, by the way, this is a one of these Liat body protectors with kind of the, not soft, but kind of flexible armor that you wear under a jersey. This setup is super light, and if I have really good mobility, I feel really free. I don't feel constricted at the waist or in my arms. You know, sitting up and down, it feels really nice and free. So for moving around a lot, standing up a lot, this is a lot more comfortable. Also, the less weight means that when I'm standing up, I have less weight, you know, to deal with, and it's just more comfortable when you're riding. It just is. So when I'm wearing the Badlands suit, I feel a lot more constricted. I feel a bit more claustrophobic, if you will. And with the Badlands suit or any other adventure suit, you just don't feel that flexibility, the mobility, and you feel the weight kind of always dragging you down. In dirt bike gear, you don't have that problem. Okay, so impact protection is the big deal, and there's really differences in how this gear functions. So I took off the jersey so you guys could see as example. I'm wearing this Liat 3D body protector, which has elbow pads, some arm pads, elbow. It has a good back protector, and of course I got a chest protector here. So that's great. Now, but I have to put this on separately, and that's the main difference. The main difference is that with adventure gear or street gear, the impact protection is going to be built into pockets in the jacket or the pants, whereas with dirt bike gear, typically you're going to have to put the impact protection on sort of underneath your jersey or your pants. So it's an extra step in getting dressed. So you can see here on the Badlands, like the back protector's built in. You know, you've got all of your armor. This even has chest armor because it's a Badlands, and I like that. So you just throw the jacket on. It's convenient. You've got all your impact protection done. Now, one thing I will say about this setup is that sometimes, depending on how your body is and how well your gear is fitting you, sometimes the armor that you put on separately like this can stay in place a little bit better, but that's not always true. It depends on what kind of jacket you have, what kind of body armor you have, is it adjusted right for you. Make sure things are fitting pretty close and tight to your body. There's some adjustment built into the positioning and armor and jackets and pants and things like that. Now for the pants, the Mojave, the over-the-boot Mojave pants, this is just an example that I have, but they actually do have pockets in these for internal armor. So what I did is I went ahead and bought the Climb D3 armor for the hips and the knees. I like this personally. This is a good halfway point for me on off-road pants because I don't really like having to wear like those armored underwear things or armored pants. I feel like they feel kind of restrictive to me, and I don't like having to put on knee guards separately from my pants. So I like this option. Just keep in mind, if you get the in the boot Mojave pant, they don't have the pockets. So look at the pants you're getting. If you want to put the armor in pockets in the pants, make sure you actually have the pockets to do so. Okay, so let's talk about boots. This is a really important subject. Now I have some boot reviews and some other videos, so you can go watch those. But let me break down the main differences in the boots. A motocross boot, this happens to be a City Crossfire, really old one, which I'm still using because they last forever. And this happens to be a City Adventure 2 Gore-Tex. So a few differences. The motocross boot, larger, bulkier, heavier, but incredible protection from impacts, from motorcycles falling on your leg, from crashing into a rock on the trail. So I try to wear the motocross boots when I can. Now, if I'm doing more street riding on my ride, or if I care about waterproofing because these have Gore-Tex, and to my knowledge there's no such thing as waterproof motocross boots, then I'll wear these if water resistance is important. But I will say that the adventure boot, while it looks fairly durable, the protection kind of pales in comparison to an actual off-road boot. So I would encourage you, if you're doing a lot of riding off-road and you're pretty aggressive, try a set of motocross boots because they really could save your ankle, they could save your leg, and I try to ride in these whenever I can. Yeah, they're a little harder to walk in, a little heavier, a little bulkier, but honestly, I've gotten used to them. I'm huge fans of the Crossfire, but that's just me. And then on the adventure boot, more for touring or light off-road use. So that's my 2 cents on the boot issue. Okay, so let's jump back to kind of the jacket and pants setup for a minute. One thing I wanted to bring up is sort of convenience and storage. What I mean is that my pants have these big pockets here on the side. Now there's a lot of off-road pants nowadays that have pockets. The popular Klein Mojave and Dakar, they have pockets much like these Badlands do. They're not going to be waterproof, but that's okay. Now a traditional motocross pant does not have any pockets, so if you're looking at off-road gear, you know, keep that in mind. A motocross rider doesn't need pockets because they're racing around a track and then go into a pit, but a dual sport rider, you do kind of like to have pockets, right? So same thing for the jacket. A jersey doesn't have any pockets in it, so I really struggle when I suit up my dirt bike gear. I'm like, my wallet and phone and my snacks or whatever the hell it is, I'm struggling. I'm like, oh crap, I got to put this in my bike somewhere or in a camelback or whatever. With something like this Badlands, I've got pockets on this thing everywhere. I could ride around the world in this thing with all my documents and various accessories that I need. Phone, wallet, you know, keys. I've got my spot in here, so that's a big factor that you lose with the off-road gear. And I mentioned this before about the convenience, but just having all the armor built into this already, I just put it on, zip it up, and I ride. I don't have to be fussing with body armor and knee guards and all those types of things. So, okay, helmets. Now this is a big deal right now. You know, these adventure style helmets with the peak have really become a fad and really taken off these past, I guess, 10 years or so. And there's good reason for that. Number one, the peak can provide some sun protection, although it's not as good as a dirt peak is. You know, a peak's also to provide some protection from roost and things like that from the trail, although again they don't tend to do as good a job as an actual dirt helmet. The other thing about the adventure helmet here is the visor. So on the highway, being able to simply flip this down and be protected from rain and bugs and cold wind and things like that is a great advantage. The other thing that's nice, most of these off-road helmets now can accommodate goggles. I use the quick straps which attach here on the side, and then I can just, here I'll show you. So one thing I do a lot with my adventure helmet is I use the quick straps on the goggles, which is just this thing here, which allows you to easily put your goggles on without the stupid strap that goes around the back. What I do is I store them back here like this. The strap's on, my goggles stay back here. When I get to the trail, I can simply put my goggles on, flip up my shield, I'm good to go. The other nice thing about this can be that, let's say I'm going to be riding at night. Well, I can put a clear lens in here, and if I had a tinted lens on here, once it got dark, I could flip up my tinted lens and put on my goggles that are clear. Or, you know, you get the idea. You have that flexibility. So the shield is nice on a dual sport helmet, but there are downsides. So what are the advantages of the off-road helmet? So let's get to that. So the off-road helmet or the motocross style helmet, a few big advantages here. First of all, I want to say they're both safe. They're both, you know, rated DOT, Snell, things like that for road impact protection. So that's not a factor so much there. But the thing with the off-road helmet is the weight, quite a bit lighter usually. You know, I know the Klim Cryos Pro Carbon is like super light, but that's a $700 helmet, so how many people are buying that? I want one, by the way, so if anyone wants to buy me one, I'll take it. But they're lighter weight, but the huge thing is going to be the ventilation. Through the bottom, through the chin, the vents are larger, larger eye opening here, and when you put your goggles on, you've got so much air moving through the helmet. I don't care how good your dual sport helmet is, maybe except the very best ones are getting better, like that Cryos Pro I mentioned. But these dirt helmets ventilate so much better, and at slow speed on single track, you're really going to enjoy having this. But using goggles on the road, the wind and the bugs and the rain are still going to get around your goggles and be smacking into your face, and that's going to be pretty unpleasant. So again, trade-offs depending on how you ride. So as you can kind of tell from my video, it just depends on what kind of ride you're going to do. I think the biggest challenge is, what if your ride is truly like 50-50? Motorcycles now have expanded their usability so far in either end. You have bikes like the 790 Adventure, which can go off-road super well and then cruise down the highway. So how do you dress? Well, that's going to depend on your preferences, your tolerance for heat and cold, how aggressive and fast on the street are you going, and how much do you value abrasion resistance, how much ventilation you require off-road, are the things like storage pockets really important to you or not? You're going to have to consider all those things. The best of both worlds is to own, you know, all the different gear that you can. Remember, good gear is an investment, and pick based on the kind of ride you're doing. What kind of gear I wear, depending on the kind of ride I'm going on, is something I struggle with every time I get on my bike. It's a little bit easier having these two bikes because typically, if I'm not having to factor in extreme temperatures, then I'll typically wear this setup on the GS because it's going to be more road focused, and the off-road's not going to be that technical because this thing is the Titanic. And if I'm riding this thing, then probably, you know, that's going to be a lot more trail oriented, and I can wear my dirt bike gear, and I'll carry like a light rain jacket or something for the cold ride, maybe on the street. So that's my 2 cents on adventure gear or street gear versus dirt bike gear. I hope this video was useful for you guys out there as you're getting into motorcycling, or maybe you're more experienced and you're still confused about these different kinds of gear. If it was useful, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Ride safe, and we'll see you next time.